Hello everyone and welcome back to Dreadline Stories. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video.
I moved to Willow Creek at the tail end of last spring, chasing cheaper rent and a chance to breathe after years of scraping by in the city. It was the sort of place where people left their doors unlocked, teenagers hung out at the gas station for fun, and everyone smiled a little too long when they asked if you were new around here. My landlord, Mr. Larrabee, was a wiry old man who handed over the keys to a quaint, slightly crooked cottage on the edge of town. White siding, flower boxes, ivy creeping up one side. It looked like something off a postcard. He told me it was built in the 1920s, sturdy as ever. He also told me to avoid the woods out back after dusk. Coyotes, he warned with a hollow grin. Or worse. I didn't press him. Not that first day. I was too busy unpacking, thrilled by the quiet, by how the air smelled like lilacs and cut grass. For the first few weeks, life was beautifully uneventful. I worked from home, wandered into town for groceries or coffee, and tried to make sense of the way the townspeople always seemed to watch me, like they were waiting for something. It wasn't until mid-July that I started noticing small things. A ceramic owl on my porch railing that hadn't been there the day before. A faint smell of smoke at my windows, even though none of my neighbors burned wood. One morning, I found a bouquet of wildflowers laid carefully on my doorstep, tied with twine. I figured it was a welcome gift, though no one admitted to it. That same evening, I decided to explore the woods Mr. Larrabee had cautioned against. Just a short walk, I told myself, to shake off the nerves. The sun was setting slow and gold, painting the tree trunks in warm light. For a while, it was peaceful. Birds chirping, leaves rustling. Then I found the circle, about 20 feet across, cleared of grass and leaves, with small stones arranged in strange, almost delicate patterns. Some of the rocks had what looked like dark smears on them, reddish-brown, sunk into the cracks. In the center lay a pile of bones, tiny and pale, picked clean. I backed away fast, feeling sick. As I turned to leave, I could have sworn I saw someone standing deeper in the woods. Just far enough that I couldn't make out a face, but close enough that I could tell they were watching me. I hurried home, heart pounding, and tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. But when I went to bed that night, every creak of the house made me start. And just before sleep finally claimed me, I thought I heard whispering outside my window, soft and quick, like voices sharing secrets meant only for the dark. I woke up the next morning with my sheets tangled around me and a dull headache pounding at my temples. The memory of the clearing, the stones, the bones, the shape in the trees, lingered so vividly. It almost felt like I'd dreamed it. But when I checked the soles of my shoes by the door, they were still caked in mud and pine needles. I tried to shrug it off, told myself it was probably some kids playing at folklore. Willow Creek had that old town charm, after all, with stories that probably went back generations. But by afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I glanced out a window, I half expected to see someone standing at the edge of my yard. Around dusk, I decided I couldn't sit there twitching all night. I'd make dinner, pour a glass of wine, put on some music. Anything to drown out my own anxiety. Halfway through chopping onions, though, a knock rattled the front door. It was sharp, deliberate. 3 quick raps. When I opened it, no one was there, except for a small burlap pouch sitting on my doormat, tied with twine. A strange smell rose from it, iron and rot. I nudged it open with a spoon. Inside were more bones, tiny again, maybe from birds or squirrels, stained dark. I dropped the spoon and slammed the door. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the kitchen counter to steady myself. That's when I noticed the footprints. They were faint but unmistakable in the dusty wood floor of the entryway, like someone with wet or muddy boots had stood just inside my door. I was certain I'd locked it. That night, I hardly slept. Every so often, I'd hear a soft rustle near the window, or what sounded like quiet giggling drifting through the walls. I told myself it was the wind, the old house settling. I told myself a lot of things. The next morning, desperate for normalcy, I went into town. At the diner, I tried to tell the waitress, a woman named Sheila with kind eyes, about what was happening. She went stiff, her smile fading. "You found the circle, didn't you?" she asked in a whisper, glancing around like someone might overhear. I nodded. "Don't go back there," she said. "Whatever you do, don't disturb it again. And if they come knocking, don't open the door, not even a crack." She wouldn't explain further, just hurried off to another table, leaving me with my coffee growing cold and a pit of dread blooming deep in my gut. That evening, just as the sun slipped behind the trees, I heard them again, the 3 deliberate knocks at my door, followed by a soft voice on the other side, almost playful. "We know you're in there." I stood frozen, barely breathing, as the knocking started up again. This time, slower, like whoever it was in no rush at all. Then the voice came again, lilting and sweet. Come out, wherever you are." I backed away, clutching the handle of a kitchen knife so hard my knuckles went white. Outside, the knocking finally stopped. But I could still hear them moving around the house, whispering, giggling, waiting, and I knew with a terrible certainty that they wouldn't stop coming back until I opened the door. I moved to Dalton Ridge in the spring of 2021 after my divorce drained me of just about everything except my old pickup and a couple of boxes of clothes. The town was exactly what I thought I needed: small, quiet, tucked in a valley surrounded by endless hills and woods. A place where no one knew me, and I could pretend for a while that my life hadn't fallen apart. I found a rental on the edge of town, a squat little house with peeling paint and a porch that leaned to one side. The rent was cheap, and the neighbors weren't close enough to overhear me pacing the floor at night. Most days I picked up work laying tile or patching roofs, whatever the local hardware store had on their bulletin board. In the evenings, I'd sit on that crooked porch with a cheap beer, listening to crickets and hoping the quiet would start to heal something inside me. It wasn't until a couple of months in that I began to notice the odd things about Dalton Ridge. The way people's eyes darted away when I mentioned certain roads outside of town. The handwritten signs tacked to telephone poles that always seemed to read the same. Missing cat. Last seen near Miller's Woods. Always a different pet, always the same woods. I tried not to think much of it, until one Friday night in June, when I ended up at the local dive, a dim, low-ceilinged place called Hank's, and met a guy named Joel. Joel was a carpenter, a big bear of a man with hands like split logs and a voice so low it felt like gravel underfoot. Over a few whiskeys, I told him about the house I was renting, about the weird sounds I'd started hearing some nights. Soft thumps against the walls, a skittering across the roof. I half-joked that I thought raccoons were trying to move in with me. Joel just stared into his glass for a long moment before he finally muttered, "You're near the old Wilkie's property, aren't you?" When I nodded, he let out this slow exhale, like he'd been hoping I'd say no. Then he leaned closer and told me a story. How, 20 years ago, the Wilkies family vanished without a trace. Mother, father, 2 young kids. Plates still on the dinner table. Dog locked inside, starved to death. Search parties combed the woods for weeks, but turned up nothing. The sheriff at the time ruled it a family disappearance. But no one in Dalton Ridge ever really believed that. Folks said the Wilkes place, and everything near it, was touched by something bad. That's why my rent was so low. I laughed it off at first, told myself Joel was full of it. Small towns loved their ghost stories. But that night, when I drove home along that narrow lane lined with gnarled trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just beyond the reach of my headlights, watching me roll by. The house was dark when I got back, just like I'd left it. I grabbed a fresh beer from the fridge and settled on the porch. But after a few minutes, I realized the night was wrong. The usual chorus of crickets and frogs had gone completely silent. I sat there, listening to that dead quiet, my skin crawling. Then I heard it, a faint shuffle in the dirt around the side of the house. I stood up so fast my chair toppled over. The sound stopped. I told myself it was a stray dog, or maybe Joel screwing with me. I picked up the flashlight I kept by the door and swept the beam across the yard. Nothing. I was about to turn back inside when something glinted at the edge of the porch steps. It was a small, rusted toy car, the kind a little kid might push through the dirt. It hadn't been there before. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might burst. I scanned the dark yard again, then backed slowly into the house, bolting the door behind me. The toy sat out there on the step, catching the moonlight. The next morning, it was gone. I didn't sleep much after finding that toy car. Every creak of the old floorboards sounded like someone sneaking up the hall. I kept jolting awake, clutching the baseball bat I'd dragged into bed with me. By dawn, I was bleary-eyed and jumpy, but determined to prove to myself it was nothing. Some local kids messing around, maybe trying to scare the new guy in town. Around mid-morning, I drove into Dalton Ridge and found Joel leaning against his pickup outside Hank's. He took one look at me and shook his head. "Rough night," he grunted. I told him about the toy car, the silence, the feeling that someone had been right there, just beyond the porch rail. Joel scratched his beard, then finally muttered, "It's starting with you too." That was when he told me something he hadn't the night before. Back when the Wilkes family vanished, it wasn't just that they disappeared. People around here started seeing things. Little signs. Toys showing up where they shouldn't be. Footprints that ended in the middle of nowhere. A neighbor found a child's shoe on his kitchen counter. Though he didn't have kids, it was like whatever took the Wilkes liked to play first. I tried to laugh it off, but Joel didn't. He grabbed my shoulder, squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Listen to me. If you hear it, little voices outside at night, don't answer. Don't open the door, no matter what." That night, I double-locked every window and door. I left the porch light blazing, like it could somehow keep the dark back, and for a while, it seemed to work. The night wore on, quiet, but for the whir of insects. I was just starting to doze on the couch when I heard it. A soft knock at the front door, 3 light taps. I froze, held my breath. It came again, followed by a voice, small, sweet, impossibly close. "Mister, can you help me? I lost my toy." My stomach turned to ice. I didn't move. The voice came again, this time from the window, as if the child had drifted across the porch without a sound. "Please, mister. I'm scared. It's so dark out here." My hand crept toward the bat, knuckles white. Then came scratching, tiny fingernails on the glass. I squeezed my eyes shut, every muscle locked tight, willing it to stop. Eventually, it did. By dawn, I dared to look outside. Nothing. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, until I found something new by the porch steps. A crumpled photograph, old, water-stained, edges curling. In it was a family standing in front of my house. Back when it was still, freshly painted, windows intact. A man, a woman, 2 kids. The little boy was clutching a toy car. The little girl's eyes seemed to look straight through me. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, was a date from 20 years ago. And a name. The Wilkes family. I packed that afternoon, didn't even wait for the landlord to come by, just left the keys on the porch and drove out of Dalton Ridge without looking back. I still sometimes dream about that little voice calling to me from the dark. And when I do, I always wake up checking the floor beside my bed, terrified I'll find another rusted toy waiting for me. I moved to Wexler's Hollow in September of last year, hoping to start fresh after my divorce. The place was one of those tiny Midwestern towns you'd never find unless you were specifically looking for it, a dot on the map surrounded by endless fields and patches of dark woods. I'd inherited my uncle's old house on the edge of town, a 2-story place with creaky floors and a wraparound porch that desperately needed paint. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and after everything I'd gone through, that felt like enough. The first few weeks were actually pretty peaceful. I'd wake up early, brew some strong coffee, and sit on the porch, watching fog drift over the cornfields. Sometimes the neighbors, mostly older couples, would wave as they walked their dogs or drove by in rusted pickups. It was quiet, almost soothing. But that calm didn't last. It started with little things. One morning, I found my trash cans tipped over, garbage torn apart, like some animal had gotten into it. I figured raccoons. Then I started noticing small stacks of rocks on my porch steps, perfect little pyramids of 3 or 4 stones. At first, I thought it was just local kids playing pranks, but each time I swept them away, they'd reappear by the next evening. About 3 weeks in, I was woken up around 2 a.m. by tapping on my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was just branches in the wind, but it was rhythmic. 3 taps, then silence, then 3 more. I lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, my heart pounding so loud I was sure whoever, or whatever, was outside could hear it. I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the blinds. There was nothing there, just my overgrown yard bathed in pale moonlight. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I tried telling myself it was stress, new place, big life changes. Maybe I was imagining things. But a few nights later, I got proof that I wasn't losing it. It was close to midnight. I was sitting in the living room, half asleep on the couch with a baseball game murmuring on the TV. That's when I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate steps, moving across the old wooden boards. They stopped right outside my front door. I muted the TV, straining to hear anything else. A few seconds passed, then came a low, scraping sound like someone dragging their nails across the doorframe. I don't know what possessed me, but I walked over and flipped on the porch light. Through the window beside the door, I caught a glimpse of someone standing just off the porch, tall, wearing dark clothes, face completely obscured by the brim of a hat. The moment the light came on, they turned and walked quickly into the cornfield across the road, vanishing between the stalks like they'd never been there at all. The local sheriff chalked it up to drifters passing through, said he'd send a car around more often, but the way he avoided looking me in the eye made it pretty clear he didn't believe me, or maybe didn't want to believe what I'd seen. After that, the feeling of being watched got worse. I'd catch fleeting glimpses of someone standing at the edge of the cornfield, or between the trees behind the house, always gone by the time I turned for a better look. My sleep became a patchwork of restless half-nights, and I started keeping a baseball bat next to my bed. Then, one night, things escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. I'll never forget the way the air felt that night. Heavy and electric, like the sky was holding its breath. I'd fallen asleep on the couch again, clutching that baseball bat across my chest, TV still droning in the background. Sometime past 1 a.m., I woke up with this cold certainty that someone was inside the house. At first, I didn't hear anything. The living room was still, only the faint blue glow from the TV screen cutting through the dark. I sat there, barely breathing, ears straining. That's when I caught its ear. The softest creak of a floorboard somewhere down the hallway that led to the kitchen. My mouth went dry. I gripped the bat tighter and stood up on trembling legs. Every instinct screamed at me to run out the front door, but something else, maybe stubborn pride or sheer paralysis, rooted me to the spot. I waited, trying to convince myself it was the old house settling, but then came another sound, a slow, deliberate shuffle, moving closer. I flicked off the TV. The sudden silence was deafening. In that stillness, I could hear my own heart thundering. Another step, closer now, too close. That's when I realized there was a faint glow spilling out from the kitchen doorway. Someone was in there. Someone had turned on the light. I edged forward, bat raised, every nerve in my body coiled tight. As I reached the corner, I risked a glance, and that's when I saw him. A man, back turned to me, standing at my kitchen sink. He wore a dirty flannel jacket and an old, sweat-stained ball cap. His hands were plunged into the sink, like he was washing something, but all I heard was water dripping slowly, inconsistently. I don't know what made the floor creak under me. Maybe a loose board. Maybe my own legs giving out. But it was enough. The man jerked around, and for the first time I saw his face, or what was left of it. The skin was mottled and sunken, lips twisted into a grotesque grin, eyes wide and glassy, like marbles. He stared right through me, head cocking slightly to one side. Then he stepped toward me. I swung the bat with everything I had. It passed through empty air. I stumbled forward, crashing into the counter. When I spun around, the kitchen was empty. The light above the sink buzzed, casting a harsh yellow glare over nothing but cracked tiles and dirty dishes. The man, or whatever he was gone. I called the sheriff again. This time he brought backup. They searched the entire property, even swept the cornfield across the road with flashlights, but found nothing. No footprints, no forced entry, nothing disturbed. They left with apologetic shrugs, telling me it was probably just stress, maybe even a vivid nightmare. I could see it in their eyes, though. They were unsettled. Maybe they'd heard stories about this place. Maybe they'd seen things, too. I didn't sleep at all after they left. I just sat on the porch until dawn, bat resting across my lap, eyes scanning the tree line. As the sun finally came up, burning away the last of the mist, I told myself I'd start packing. Wexler's Hollow had promised me peace, a new chapter, but it had given me something far darker. I've already listed the house for sale, and every time I see a shadow shift between the cornstalks or hear footsteps that stop just out of sight, I whisper to myself that it won't be my problem much longer. But deep down, I can't shake the fear that whoever, or whatever, found me here might not stay behind when I finally leave.